Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Hayes. It's September 16th, 2022, and in the news, Xi and Putin meet at the SCO. So I'm going to talk about that, or I'm going to talk about what is the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We'll get to that, but first a brief update on the war. Okay, here I am down here. So looking at the map, and again, all credit goes to the Institute for the Study of War. See them at understandingwar.org. Yesterday I didn't really comment on this. There had been an attack on the dam near Kryviy Rih. Kryviy Rih, hometown of Zelensky. That's up there, circled, up there, circled by the red. And the key thing about this, right? The Russians used several cruise missiles to attack a dam. There's a big reservoir there, you can sort of see it to the left of the K, and that feeds the Inolets River, right, which I've highlighted in yellow. That runs down all the way to the Dnipro River by Kherson. And the Ukrainians have many crossings. They have to cross it for many reasons prior to, upstream of where the Russians are. And so the press coverage focused on the dam and the flooding that occurred. And they did look like they damaged the spillway, but it looks like they've got it under control. They didn't quite take out the dam. It's not a dam buster situation. It's more of a damaging one. And they seem to have got it under control. But the point was that the Russians were probably trying to flood the river, make it more difficult for the Ukrainians to cross. Meanwhile, throughout the south, fighting continues. And it is important to remember that the Ukrainians telegraphed a southern offensive for months. And the whole point was to draw the Russians down, focus their energy, and attention on the south so the Ukrainians could attack in the north. Well, now that the north is taken and they're still fighting, this wasn't a fake attack, right? They actually are interdicting. They're not really banging their heads too much. They are putting pressure and they are fighting on these guys. But it's important to remember, these are the positions the Russians prepared and where they gave a lot of, reinforcements. And so the Ukrainians are going more slowly here, so they're not banging their head against the wall, which just makes sense. And then, of course, up by Izium, things haven't moved much up there, but we are seeing in the occupied areas the atrocities coming to light. This is, important in that the more Europeans are reminded of how bad it is to be occupied by Russia, the more they see Russia as a threat, and the more they're likely to take higher gas prices and, continue to support Ukraine. And certainly, they're probably going to view the Russian gas embargo as a separate issue. Do we want to be beholden to these guys, right? And so the more bad stuff the Russians rack up, the stiffer European resolve. Although one wonders whether these things are going to make as much an impression as the first atrocities, right? So we'll have to see how that plays out. But that's what's going on in the war. Let's get over to the SCO. Okay, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is it came out of a group of nations met in Shanghai, the Shanghai Five. And if you look at the list of members, it's the first 5 members on that list. And so China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. They quickly added Uzbekistan in there, I think. And because it starts out with 5, it quickly moves up and to 6. And so those first groups are part of that, right? Then we have a few years ago, India and Pakistan joined, and very recently, Iran joined. Right. And so these are all your Eurasian nations. Right. Then we have observers and dialogue partners. Mongolia, another important, big nation in there, has only observer status. Also, Afghanistan and Belarus is, even though it's considered more a European country, it's, increasingly it's hard to discern it from Russia. So those are your observers. Then we have something called dialogue partners who, have some role and attend or have send representatives to things. I don't know. They are Sri Lanka, Turkey, Cambodia, Azerbaijan, Nepal, Armenia, and Egypt, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia are in the process of being added in as this. So lots of folks, mainly centered on Eurasia, right? This is, if you look at a map, they're all contiguous, and it's the landmass of Asia. And they comprise something like 40% of the world population and 30% of global GDP, right? So it's a large group of people with China in the middle. And we should always remember the word China means middle country or middle kingdom, right? So, this group kind of fits China's historical or in their worldview, right? That they are traditionally the center of these things. And so this is an organization that fits that. Now, they're mainly focused on security threats. They do have economic cooperation as part of things, but there are other organizations that they work through that. But the primary thing is security threats, which they define as being terrorism, separatism, and extremism, right? That's what they think of as security threats. So it's not external or interstate violence, it's inherently internal, right? And they see, terrorism, separatism, big one, right? You got those pesky republics that want to be, their own state, and extremism, people that don't conform with your culture. And so these are the kinds of issues. They also have thrown in drug trafficking, right, as something they are looking at more practically. But these are what they consider the security threats, and you'll note it has a decided internal security cast to it. They've also recently redefined cyber warfare as dissemination of information harmful to the spiritual, moral, and cultural sphere of other states. So they say that if you're doing that, TikTok, then you are, a security threat. And you can see that there's another dimension of, I would say this is kind of the creeping modernism and Westernism and that sort of thing that kind of, I don't know, they might consider that extremism, right? Human rights and that sort of thing. Now, when we look at the nations here, I think the key thing is, this is coming up because Xi and Putin are meeting. And Xi and Putin are meeting to talk about Ukraine, and we're reading into it whether Xi is supporting Ukraine, the war against Ukraine, and are they going with Russia? And there's a global cast, right? When people talk about this, they focus on Russia and China and their kind of global ambitions. And I think an important thing, as we see some statements coming out, and they're meeting today, probably it's something like 6 a.m. here. God, this is when I do this stuff. 6 a.m. 6 a.m. in Maine, and it's probably they're well underway over there. We're going to hear communiques that are going to, at some level, might reflect the multilateral nature of this, right? That this is not a China-Russia summit, right? And even though China is the big player here, China's in a room. I mean, Russia at one point we would have thought was a big player. They're increasingly, I think, diminished by the war. But you got India in there, right? India's the other great, there's increasingly it's China, U.S., India. India's coming up from behind, but so you have these other folks in there, right, who have different issues. And when you look at the security concerns and political interests of this collection of folks, if you're trying to build an anti-Western coalition in here, that's problematic, right? I mean, sure, China, Russia, and Iran all on board for this. But, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, all the stands, right? Uzbekistan, they might be, especially in Kazakhstan's case, very worried about Russia doing to them what it did to Ukraine. And when you look at Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan is giving support to Ukraine, right? They're totally on board against Russia there, right? And so, you've got that. Then you've got India, right? Who, it's pro-Russian, right? They're an ally of Russia, and they've been very reluctant to criticize Russia, and they're certainly trading with them. And so they've been abstaining on all these votes at the UN. But they're not pro-China, right? Their security concerns are with China. And so if Russia and China want to help each other, they're sure India might want to help Russia, but it's going to be worried about the effect that has on China. So India's in there as a spoiler for China and China's ambitions to a certain extent. So you've got these cross-cutting issues and interests here that I think complicate this. And so we want to watch anything that comes out of that. We want to keep in mind that there is going to be this underlying multilateral thing, and that this organization, they have common interests in some ways on some things, and, resisting Western influence, kind of the internal cultural stuff, right, is probably going to be their bigger common ground. Resisting the West, is this a manipulation at a geopolitical global level? This is maybe not the organization for that. So we'll have to see. And we want to just keep that in mind as we see statements and reporting on this coming out. Thank you for watching my short rant. I hope it was short and not too much of a rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content. So there. And if you want to learn more about Troy anyway, figure out who would hire a guy like this, you can always go to www.troy.edu. I also am going to have a little card popping up here that you can go see my bio and some information about where I teach, which will descend to shameless self-promotion. But I want more students. What can I say? And finally, the music you've been listening to is Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy another short rant.